For 38 years, I stood at a chalkboard and taught other people's children that the smallest thing repeated long enough becomes unstoppable. A penny, a habit, a choice made every single morning when nobody's watching. My name is Eleanor Whitfield, Nell, to the people who actually know me, and I am 71 years old. On the 15th day, I lay alone in that hospital bed. The 4 children I raised proved they had never once listened to a word I said, and the very lesson they laughed at their whole lives was about to cost them everything they thought they already owned. If you're listening from somewhere far away, drop your city in the comments so I can see how far this has traveled. And please, stay with me until the end. My name is Eleanor Whitfield. I'm 71 years old, and I want to tell you about the surgery that was supposed to slow me down and instead woke me all the way up. I never thought of myself as remarkable. I was a high school math teacher in a brick building off Route 9 for 38 years. I married a union electrician named Raymond in 1976, and for 45 years we lived in the same modest 2-story house with the crooked porch step he kept promising to fix and never did. Raymond ran wire through half the office buildings downtown. I taught their accountants how to factor. We were not fancy people. We clipped coupons. We split entrees at the diner and felt like we were getting away with something. But here's the thing nobody knew about Nell Whitfield, the lady with the reading glasses on a beaded chain. Every September, for the first day of every algebra class, I gave the same lecture. I'd draw a little graph on the board, a curve that started flat and then went vertical like a rocket, and I'd say, "This is compound interest. This is the eighth wonder of the world. Small, boring, patient, and then one day, enormous." The kids would groan. Every year, 38 years of teenagers groaning at the same curve. What none of them knew, what none of my own children ever bothered to ask, was that I wasn't just teaching it, I was living it. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the Sunday before everything broke. My hip had been going for 2 years. The doctor, a careful young man named Dr. Lane, finally looked at the films and said, "Mrs. Whitfield, we're past physical therapy. You need a full replacement, and recovery's no joke at your age. You'll need someone with you for a few weeks. Family ideally. I held on to that word like a railing. I called my 4 kids and told them to come for Sunday dinner. I made cornbread from my mother's recipe, the kind with the crispy edges, and a pot roast that filled the whole house with the smell of home. I set the good plates. I wanted to break the news gently, the way you tell people something hard. They came. They always came when there was food. Greg arrived first. My oldest, 49 now, a financial advisor with a firm handshake and a watch he made you notice. He clapped me on the shoulder. "Smells amazing, Ma. You're killing it." Then Diane, my only daughter, 46, an ICU nurse who came straight off a shift with the exhaustion still sitting under her eyes. She hugged me longer than usual that day. I should have paid attention to that. Aaron came next. 43 real estate, all teeth and cologne, scrolling his phone before he even sat down. "Sorry, Ma, market's bananas right now. Let me just send this one thing." And Tyler, my baby, 37, who arrived 20 minutes late with no explanation and helped himself to the cornbread before Grace. Tyler had been figuring things out since his early 20s. I waited until they were full and warm and loose, and then I told them. Hip surgery, 3 weeks of recovery. I'd need help. The promises came so fast and so beautiful it made my chest ache. "Don't even worry about it," Gregsy said. "We'll set up a schedule. I'll take the first stretch. I can work remote from your couch, no sweat." "Ma, I literally do this for a living," Diane said, squeezing my hand. "I'll handle your meds, your wound care, all of it. You're in good hands." "I'll cover the weekends," Aaron said. "Bring the kids by. Make it fun." Tyler raised his fork like a toast. "I got nothing but time, Ma. I'm your guy." I cried a little. I'm not ashamed of it. I'd been so afraid, not of the knife, not of the anesthesia, but of being alone when I was helpless. And here were my 4 children promising I'd never have to be. I went into that hospital at peace. The surgery went fine. That's the cruel joke of it. The surgery was the easy part. I woke up in a fog of pain, my mouth dry as paper, and I turned my head toward the chair beside my bed, the chair where my child was supposed to be sitting. It was empty. First day, I told myself they were coordinating, working out the schedule. By evening, the chair was still empty, and the only voices I'd heard were the nurses and the lady in the next bed watching game shows too loud. Second day, I called Diane. It rang and went to voicemail. I texted, "Sweetheart, I'm having trouble sitting up. The nurse says I shouldn't do it alone. Can you come?" 2 hours later, "So slammed today, Mom. I'll get Greg to swing by. Love you." Greg didn't swing by. Greg texted, "Crazy week, we'll call soon." He never called. Third day, fourth. I started telling time by the food cart, the watery tomato soup at noon, the rubber chicken at 6, the little carton of warm apple juice they left at night that I couldn't open with my shaking hands. On the fifth day, I texted Tyler. "Honey, why hasn't anyone come?" He wrote back, "Sending you so much positive energy, Ma. You got this." Positive energy. I had a fresh incision in my hip and a son sending me emoji from his couch. On the seventh day, a young woman came in to help me. Her name tag said Rennie. She was a CNA, a certified nursing assistant, the ones who do the hard, unglamorous, hands-on work that nobody thanks them for. I was trying to brush my hair and crying because I couldn't lift my arm high enough. She didn't make a fuss. She just took the brush, sat on the edge of the bed, and started working through the tangles, gentle as anything. And then she asked me, soft, almost like she was afraid of the answer, "Mrs. Whitfield, do you have any family? I want you to understand." That question hurt worse than the surgery, because I had to decide what was true. "I have 4 children," I whispered. She didn't say anything mean. She didn't even look surprised, which was somehow worse. She just smoothed my hair down and fixed my pillow and said, "Well, you ring that bell anytime, okay? Day or night. I'll come." And she did. Every time. Renee was the one holding my hand the first time the physical therapist hauled me to my feet, and the room went white and I thought I'd pass out from the pain. Renee was the one who snuck me a slice of carrot cake from the break room the day I made it to the bathroom and back on my own. There was something in the way she looked at me, though something I couldn't place. She called me Mrs. Whitfield, like the words meant something private to her. I figured I was imagining it. The mind does strange things on hospital pain medication. From my 4 children in 15 days, I got exactly 4 words total that mattered. "Get well soon, Ma." On the 15th day, Doctor Lane came in beaming. "Mrs. Whitfield, you're a rock star. You're cleared to go home. Call your family to come get you." My heart actually lifted at now, I thought. Now they'll come. Now it's real. I called Greg. Voicemail. I called Diane. Voicemail. Aaron, straight to voicemail. Tyler, ring, nothing. Dr. Lane came back 40 minutes later. "Are they on their way?" "They're busy," I said. "It's fine. I can manage." Renee was standing in the doorway with my discharge papers, and I saw her jaw tighten. She helped me into a clean blouse and packed my little bag. "Want me to call you a cab, hon?" "No, thank you," I said. "I know how to use the app. I'll get an Uber." A 71-year-old woman, fresh out of hip surgery, ordering her own ride home on a phone, while her 4 grown children let it go to voicemail. The driver was a polite young man, a veteran, he told me, just back home. He loaded my bag and helped me into the seat like I was made of glass. "You live alone, ma'am?" "I have 4 children," I said. The words tasted like a lie, even though they were true. We pulled up to my house, and it sat there dark and silent in the late afternoon. The crooked porch steps still crooked. The driver carried my bag to the door. "You sure you're going to be okay in there?" "I'll be just fine. Thank you, son." I went in. The house smelled closed up and stale. I turned on the lights, and there they all were on the mantel. Greg's graduation, Diane in her nursing whites, Aaron's wedding, Tyler as a gap-toothed 8-year-old before he learned how to disappoint people. Smiling. All of them smiling. I shuffled to the kitchen on my walker and opened the refrigerator. Inside, a box of baking soda from what looked like the Obama administration, half a jar of yellow mustard, and a wilted lemon. That's the moment it became real. Not the empty chair, the empty fridge. Because it meant that in 15 days, not one of my 4 children had thought about the simplest thing, what their mother would eat when she got home. They hadn't pictured me here at all. They hadn't thought about me as a person who would be hungry, who would be cold, who would need. I sat down at the kitchen table where I'd served that pot roast, and I waited to cry. The tears didn't come. Something else came instead, something cold and clear and very, very awake. They didn't think I was worth taking care of, but they sure had thought I was worth borrowing from. That was the thought that sent me down the hall to Raymond's old desk. In the bottom drawer, under the manila folders, was a leather-bound notebook, cracked and soft at the corners. I'd kept it for 40 years. The kids, when they were little, used to see me writing in it and they'd tease me. Mom's in her grade book again. Because I held the household accounts the same way I held a class. Every entry, every loan, every promise, recorded in my small, neat teacher's hand. I never charged my children interest. I never even reminded them, but I wrote it all down. A teacher writes everything down. I sat at that desk under the lamp and I opened my grade book and I started turning pages. But before I tell you what was in it, I have to tell you about the text messages. Because that's where this stops being a story about neglect and becomes a story about something much colder. Tyler had left his old phone at my house weeks ago, charging on the counter, the way Tyler leaves things everywhere, because the world is his other's house. While I was pouring myself a glass of water, it lit up. A group chat. The name of the chat was Logistics. I am not proud of what I did next, but I'm not sorry either. I picked it up and I read. It went back weeks, before my surgery. There was the schedule they'd promised me, Greg's name, Diane's errands, neatly laid out. And then, the day after I checked in, the schedule just dissolved. Greg, yeah, I can't actually do the couch thing. Got the Hendricks account blowing up Aaron. Same law, I'm out. Can't lose this listing. She'll be fine. It's a hospital. That's literally what they're for, Diane. I really can't right now. Trust me. Tyler, Lamont. So who's telling her, Greg? Nobody. She won't even notice. She's doped up. Just send a text every couple days, and then 3 days into my stay, while I lay in that bed learning to tell time by the soup, this Aaron. Okay, real talk. While we're on the subject. What's the plan for after? Greg meaning? Aaron meaning she's 71, she just had major surgery. She can't keep living alone in that house and managing her own stuff. I've got a buyer who'd pay over asking for that lot. It's a teardown, but the land's gold, Greg. Agreed, we should get ahead of it. POA, get her somewhere with care, handle the finances so she doesn't do anything dumb with what's left, Aaron. Maple Grove is nice. I'll get a brochure. Diane, guys, Greg, what Diane? I read it 3 times. I read it until the words stopped being words. They hadn't forgotten me. They hadn't been too busy. They had made a decision. They had looked at their mother, sick, helpless, alone, and seen not a person to care for, but an asset to manage, a house to sell, a problem to file away in a place called Maple Grove. I set the phone down very gently because my hands wanted to throw it, and I turned back to my grade book. Here is what 40 years of small, neat handwriting told me. Greg, my financial advisor, the man who managed strangers' retirements, had borrowed $62,000 from me, in pieces. Just till I close this deal, Ma. Bridge thing, I'll have it back in 90 days. The oldest entry was 4 years old. He had never paid back a cent. Aaron had let me cover his daughter's private school tuition for 3 years running, $18,000 a year. We're house poor right now, Ma, soon as the market turns. The market had turned 6 times. Diane, and this is the one that confused me, was an entry I'd written almost out of love. I'd co-signed a loan for her 2 years ago. She'd come to me white-faced, said she needed it, wouldn't say what for. I didn't ask. You don't always ask your kids. I just signed, and Tyler. There was barely an entry for Tyler because Tyler wasn't a loan. He was a standing order, an automatic transfer on the first of every month for 11 years. His rent, his phone, his car insurance, his between things money. Tyler was 37 years old, and I had been paying for him to be a teenager for over a decade. I added it all up at that desk, the way I used to add up a class's grades. Almost $10,000 a month, flowing out of me and into them every single month for years. They drained me like I was a well that couldn't run dry. And I sat there and I thought about my September lecture. The rocket curve, compound interest, small, boring, patient, and then enormous. And I started to laugh because I realized I had taught everyone's children that lesson except my own. I'd taught my own children the opposite. I'd taught them I was infinite. I never said no. So they learned there was no such thing as no now. Here is the part where most people, looking at a 71-year-old widow with an empty fridge and 4 ungrateful children, would feel sorry for me. Don't. Because there was one more drawer in that desk and one more thing in my grade book on a page I'd never shown to a living soul, not even Raymond, in the year before he died. In 1987, when I was 33, I bought stock in a boring company, a company that made things people bought every day and would always buy. I put in a little out of every paycheck, the boring, patient, automatic way, and I kept adding to it for the rest of my working years. And I made one rule for myself, the same rule I gave my students every September. You don't touch it. You don't sell when you're scared. You don't sell when you're broke. You let the rocket fly. And I never touched it. I didn't sell when Raymond got laid off in 91 and we ate beans for a winter. I didn't sell when the market crashed in 2008 and everyone I knew panicked. I didn't sell when Raymond got sick in 2019 and again when he passed in 2021, and the loneliness made me want to burn the whole world down. I didn't sell when my own roof needed replacing, and I paid for it out of my pension instead. For 39 years, I let it compound. That night, on my walker, in pain, I logged into the brokerage account I checked exactly twice a year. I knew roughly what was there. But seeing the number, on that night in that house, after that fridge, $4,800,000, plus a house that was paid off in full. I had to sit down, and I was already sitting down. My children thought I lived on a teacher's pension and a Social Security check. They thought I was a teardown on a gold lot. They had spent years calling me at the end of the month, calling me old-fashioned, calling me a woman who didn't understand money. Me, who taught compound interest to 3,000 teenagers, and the whole time I was a millionaire several times over, sitting at a kitchen table with a wilted lemon in the fridge because they couldn't be bothered to buy me bread. The discipline they laughed at had made me rich. The patience they had no interest in had been working for me quietly for 39 years, the way it always does. Compound interest doesn't laugh back. It just keeps working. I closed the laptop, and for the first time in 15 days, I smiled. I'd already decided who I was going to deal with first. Greg, probably. The biggest debt, the ringleader of logistics, the one who typed she won't even notice, she's doped up. But before I could pick up the phone, I did the thing a teacher does. Did all the evidence again, because something didn't fit. One entry on the board didn't match the others, Diane. Diane, guys, Diane, VM, she'd never finished a sentence in that whole ugly chat. She hadn't piled on. She hadn't planned the nursing home or the buyer. And that loan I'd co-signed 2 years ago, the one she wouldn't explain, I called the hospital, not to complain. I called the billing department because I'm a woman who reads statements, and I asked a question, and the answers changed everything. My daughter, the ICU nurse, who couldn't come to my bedside, had a son, my grandson, Caleb, 17 years old. And Caleb had been in and out of that same hospital for 14 months, 3 floors up from where I lay, fighting a cancer she had never once told me about. She hadn't abandoned me because she didn't care. She had abandoned me because she was drowning 3 floors up, holding her dying boy's hand, too ashamed and too proud and too far past empty to tell her own mother she needed help. The loan I'd co-signed had paid for the first round of treatment her insurance fought. The "I really can't right now, trust me" wasn't a brush off. It was a woman whose entire self had been poured into a hospital bed that wasn't mine. I sat with that for a long time. Because here is the terrible, complicated truth. She was both. She was a daughter who left her mother alone in the dark, and she was a mother being crushed under a weight no one should carry alone. She'd lied to me. She'd let me think she was just busy, just careless, just like the others. And the reason she lied was the same reason I'd never said no to any of them. Pride dressed up as protection. I had spent 15 days thinking I knew exactly who my 4 children were. I didn't know my children at all. The next morning, I called a lawyer. Not Raymond's old guy, he'd retired. I called a woman named Margaret Sullivan, Marge. She specialized in something I'd never had reason to think about, elder law. Marge came to my house in a gray suit with a leather bag, and she didn't pat my hand or tell me to calm down or say, "But they're your children." She poured her own coffee, sat across from me, and listened while I told her all of it, the chair, the soup, the Uber, the fridge, the grade book, the 4.8 million, and logistics. When I finished, she was quiet for a second. Then she said the thing I needed to hear. Mrs. Whitfield, I'm going to tell you something I tell all my clients, and I need you to really hear it. When an older person has assets and starts needing care, the phrase, we're just doing what's best for you, is very often the opening line of a hostile takeover. Power of attorney, a competency challenge, a quiet sale. I've seen it 100 times, and it almost always comes wrapped in love. She leaned forward. From what you've described, your children may be planning to have you declared incapable of managing your own affairs. The good news is you came to me before the dinner, not after. The dinner? The one they're going to invite you to, she said. The reconciliation dinner. Trust me, it's coming. And when it comes, you're going to be ready, and they are not going to know what hit them. I felt something I hadn't felt in 15 days. I felt like a teacher again, like someone holding the answer key. Marge, I said, before we do anything else, I want to get evaluated. She tilted her head. A competencies evaluation. Cognitive testing, the whole thing, voluntarily. I want it documented by the best people you know that Eleanor Whitfield is sharper than anyone at that table. If they're going to call me confused, I want a stack of paper that says I'm not. Marge smiled for the first time. Mrs. Whitfield, I think you and I are going to get along just fine. Now, I want to tell you about the phone calls because they came exactly the way Marge said they would. The instant I started turning off the faucet. First thing I did was small. I canceled the automatic transfer to Tyler. 3 taps on an app, a 37-year-old man told me his whole life I was too old to understand. On the first of the month, when his rent money didn't appear, Tyler called. His voice was sweet as pie, which is how I knew he wanted something. Hey, Ma, how you feeling? You back on your feet? Getting there. That's awesome. That's so awesome. Hey, weird thing, the deposit didn't come through this morning? Must be a bank glitch or something. Can you call him? There's no glitch, Tyler. What do you mean? I mean, I turned it off. There was a silence so long I could hear his TV in the background. You wait. Why? Ma, that's my rent. That's how I eat. You're 37, sweetheart. So, Ma, I can't just, what am I supposed to do? And I didn't yell. I want you to know I didn't yell. I just said, your grandfather rewired half this city with his 2 hands. He started as an apprentice sweeping floors. I think you can figure out job application. A pause. Come to dinner Sunday, 7 o'clock. If you want a ride, the bus runs right past your place. I hung up before he could cry. Tyler's tears were the most expensive thing he owned, and he'd been spending them on me for years. Greg called next, and Greg didn't bother with sweet. Ma, what is going on? Tyler's freaking out, said you cut him off, said you're acting weird. Hello, Greg. Are you okay? Like mentally? Because cutting Tyler off out of nowhere, that's not like you. The surgery, the meds, sometimes that messes with Greg. I said his name the way I used to say a student's name when they hadn't done the reading. When are you planning to pay back the $62,000 you owe me? The line went dead quiet. What? Ma, come on. We don't need to do this over the phone. 62,000. The oldest piece is from 4 years ago. You're a financial advisor, Greg. You tell other people to live within their means. So I have to ask you, as one money person to another, where's your balance sheet? Because mine says you're deep in the red. I heard him breathing, and then I heard the truth crack through, the way it does when you push on the right spot. Things have been tight, okay? The firm's been brutal. I got behind. I was going to make it right. I swear I just needed time. Greg, the man who managed retirements, was underwater. The whole killing it act, the watch, the firm handshake, it was a costume. He hadn't borrowed from me because he was confident. He'd borrowed because he was sinking, and I was the only one who'd never ask why. Come to dinner Sunday, I said. 7 o'clock. Bring your calculator. Aaron didn't call me. Aaron, being Aaron, made a mistake instead. An appraiser called my house, a wrong number, or maybe just a careless one, asking to confirm an appointment to assess the property for Mr. Whitfield's listing, my property, my house. Listed by my son while I was in the hospital. I didn't call Aaron to scream. I just thought, all right, Sunday then. And Diane, I didn't call Diane at all. I drove myself 3 weeks post-op, white-knuckling the wheel to the hospital, up 3 floors, to a wing I'd never had reason to visit. And I found my daughter asleep in a chair beside a hospital bed, holding the hand of a bald, sleeping 17-year-old boy with my late husband's exact stubborn chin. She woke up and saw me, and her whole face came apart. "Mom," she breathed. "Mom, how did you?" I didn't say anything about the dinner. I didn't say anything about logistics. I crossed the room and I sat down in the empty chair on the other side of my grandson's bed, the kind of chair I'd stared at, empty, for 15 days. And I took Caleb's other hand. "You should have told me," I said quietly. "I couldn't." Her voice was a wreck. You'd have given me everything. And I couldn't watch you go broke for us. I couldn't. You've given enough. You've given your whole, Diane. I looked at her over my grandson's sleeping body. "I have more than you think. We'll talk about that later. Right now, I need you to hear me. You were wrong to leave me alone, and I was wrong to raise you all to think you could never ever ask. Both things are true. We're going to fix both things. But not tonight." She cried so hard the nurse came to check. I held her boy's hand and let her. "I want to be honest with you, because this is the kind of story where it's easy to make everyone a hero or a villain. Diane left me alone in the worst week of my life and lied about why. That was real, and it hurt, and I didn't pretend it away. But she lied out of the same broken thing I'd built in all of them. She was the only one in a group who couldn't finish her sentence. Guys, NVM. That half sentence was the only flicker of conscience in the whole ugly thread. So when I planned what came next, I planned it for 3 of my children. The fourth I was going to try to save. The invitation came on a Tuesday, exactly like Marge said it would. Greg calling in his warm, let's all get on the same page voice. "Ma, we've all been talking, and we think it'd be good to do a family dinner. Clear the air. We love you. We're worried about you. We just want to sit down together. Sunday work?" I almost laughed. I'd already invited them to Sunday dinner. They were inviting me to my own ambush. Because here's what I knew from logistics and from a few quiet things Marge had dug up. The clear the air dinner was the trap closing. Greg had power of attorney paperwork already drawn up. I'd find out later it was sitting in his briefcase that very night. Aaron had a purchase agreement for the house ready for signatures contingent on me being unable to manage my affairs. And they'd found a doctor willing to start the paperwork on a competency claim, to have their own mother declared incapable so they could file her away in Maple Grove and divide the gold lot. They thought they were walking into a dinner to handle their confused, fragile, post-surgical mother. They had no idea they were walking into a final exam, and I was the one who wrote it. "Sunday's perfect," I said sweetly. 7 o'clock, I'll make it special. I did not spend the day cooking. That was the old Nell, the one who'd pour 8 hours of love into a meal for people who'd eat it and leave. I called the good restaurant down the road and ordered everything brought in, a roast, the works. My time, I'd finally learned, was worth more than that. By 6, I was ready. I showered and I put on the navy dress Raymond always said matched my eyes, and I brushed out my silver hair, and I put on a little red lipstick. I did not want to look like a patient. I wanted to look like the woman who owned the house and everything in it. Because I was. I set the table with the everyday plates, not the good china. This wasn't a celebration. And in the center of the table, where a centerpiece would go, I set the grade book, closed, waiting. Marge was parked around the corner with her phone on. They arrived right at 7. Diane came first, and she caught my eye, and something passed between us. She didn't know the whole plan, but she knew I wasn't the woman they thought they were coming for. Then Aaron, all teeth. Then Greg with his briefcase like he was billing hours, and Tyler last, thin and pale, who took the bus. Nobody sat. The smell of the roast filled the room, and I watched it land on them. The smell of every Sunday I'd ever cooked for them. The mother they'd spent. Greg took point, because Greg always takes point. He spread his hands like a man closing a deal. "Ma, look, we're all here because we love you, okay? That's the bottom line. But we gotta be real with you. This whole thing lately, cutting Tyler off, the lawyer, calling me about money out of the blue, it's not you. We think the surgery, the anesthesia, maybe it's affecting your judgment. And it's okay, it happens. But we can't just sit back and watch you make decisions you can't. Decisions I can't what, Greg? I said. Aaron jumped in, sliding a glossy brochure across the table. Maple Grove, green lawns, a heated pool, smiling gray-haired actors. It's a really nice place, Ma, top-rated. They handle everything. Meals, your meds, even the bills, so you don't have to stress about a single thing. We'd come visit all the time. They handle the bills, I repeated. It's for your own good, Diane said quietly, and I heard it, the way she said it, like she was reading a line someone else had written, like it was costing her something. She wasn't fully with them, but she wasn't stopping it either, not yet. Then Tyler dropped to his knees beside my chair. Right on cue, I saw Greg's tiny nod, the director cooing his actor. Ma, please, Tyler started, the tears already going. I'm so sorry, I've been the worst, I don't deserve. But I'm scared for you. We all are. Please just let us take care of. And then something happened that wasn't in their script. Tyler stopped. He was looking up at me, my baby, 37 years old, with his cheeks wet and his hands shaking, and whatever he was supposed to say next, he couldn't say it. His mouth opened and nothing came out, and then very small, in a voice I hadn't heard since he was a boy, he said, I can't do this. Greg, I can't. The room went tight. Tyler, Greg said sharply. Sit down. No, Tyler whispered, and he stayed on his knees, but he stopped performing. He just looked at me, terrified and honest for maybe the first time in 20 years. That was the moment I stood up. The pain flared in my hip, but I stood and I put one hand flat on the closed grade book, and I looked at the four of them, three planning, one breaking, and I said, sit down, all of you. Class is in session. The doorbell rang. Greg frowned. Who's that? Nobody else is. Oh, somebody else is, I said. Come in, Marge. The door opened and Margaret Sullivan walked in. Gray suit, leather bag, calm as a Sunday. Good evening, she said. I'm Margaret Sullivan. I'm Mrs. Whitfield's attorney. She mentioned you'd come tonight with an interesting proposal, a nursing home and a power of attorney. I'm here to represent her interests. The temperature in that room dropped 20 degrees. I watched the blood leave their faces, watched the dinner turn into something else entirely, a deposition. You got a lawyer? Aaron sputtered. Sit, Marge said, pleasant as anything. And they sat, all of them, like the children they used to be. I opened the grade book. You think I'm confused, I said. You think I can't manage my own affairs. Let's test that theory. Let's see who in this room has actually been managing their affairs. And I read, page by page. Greg, $62,000, 4 years, zero repaid. Aaron, $54,000 in tuition plus, I added, looking him dead in the eye, an appraisal you ordered on my house while I was in a hospital bed. Diane, the co-signed loan which I noted gently. I do not hold against her for reasons that are her own. And Tyler, 11 years, every first of the month. With every number, their faces fell a little further. You treated me like an ATM that had run out of money, I said. You didn't abandon me because you were busy. You abandoned me because I stopped being useful and started being a cost. And then you came here tonight not to apologize, to take what's left. Greg recovered first, because men like Greg always think there's one more card. He stood up, jaw working. Okay, you know what? Take what, Ma? The pension? This teardown? You're spending money on lawyers you don't have, over a house and a couple grand. You're old, you're alone, and frankly, this performance only proves you're not thinking straight. I looked at Marge. Would you? Marge opened her bag. The first thing she laid on the table was a thick-clipped report. This is a full cognitive and competency evaluation conducted 3 weeks ago by 2 independent specialists at Mrs. Whitfield's own request. Their conclusion, and I'm quoting, is that Mrs. Whitfield demonstrates cognitive function well, above average for her age, and frankly, for the population at large. She slid it toward Greg. She is, in the clinical opinion of 2 doctors, sharper than anyone in this room. Any competency claim you've started is dead on arrival. I'd advise you to stop paying whoever you hired. Greg's mouth opened and closed. And as for the teardown, I said. Marge laid down the second document, the brokerage statement. I watched my children read a number they could not make their eyes believe. $4.8 million, I said. One position. Started in 1987. Added to for years and then held, never sold. Not when your father lost work, not in '08, not when he died, not when my own roof caved in. Compound interest. I almost laughed. The lesson I gave every September, the one you all rolled your eyes at, the one Tyler called the boring rocket speech. That boring speech bought the house you wanted to sell and $4 million more besides. Aaron made a sound like the wind got knocked out of him. Diane put her hand over her mouth. Greg sat down hard. Tyler on the floor started to cry again, but a different kind of crying. And then I watched the most predictable thing in the world happen. I watched Aaron's face shift from shock to greed in the space of a single breath. Ma, he said, leaning in, suddenly so warm. Oh my God, that's incredible. That's amazing. This changes everything. You're going to be set. We're going to be, stop, I said. Marge laid down the third document. This is Mrs. Whitfield's new will, she said, executed and witnessed last week. It replaces the previous version, which divided everything equally among her 4 children. You can't, Greg started. She can, Marge said. She's of sound mind. We have a 100-page report that says so. You handed it to me. Here is where. If this were one of those revenge stories, I would have screamed get out and slammed the door in their faces and felt the cold satisfaction of it. I didn't. Because somewhere in the last 3 weeks, between the empty chair and the empty fridge and the hospital room 3 floors up, I'd figured out the difference between revenge and justice. Revenge is a cold meal. You eat it and it poisons you. Justice is a hot one. It costs more to cook, but it actually feeds you. So I didn't scream. I said it quietly, and I think that's why it landed so hard. I'm not going to punish you, I said. I want you to understand that this was never about hurting you. It's about something simpler. I am done paying the price for being treated like I don't matter. I looked at Greg. You owe me $62,000 and a competency claim against your own mother. We're going to handle the money through Marge on a real schedule, with real terms, like the professional you pretend to be. And you're going to call off your doctor by Monday. I looked at Aaron. You're going to call your buyer and tell them the house isn't for sale. It's never been for sale. And you're never going to set foot in it again to measure it for anyone. I looked at Tyler, still on the floor. And my voice changed. And you stood up tonight. It was the smallest thing, and it might be the only brave thing you've ever done. And I saw it. We'll talk. And then I turned to Diane. The whole room was braced for me to drop the hammer on her, too. Instead, I crossed to her chair and I took both her hands and I said, in front of all of them, you stay. We have a grandson to talk about, a real conversation. The kind this family forgot how to have. 3 faces went white with confusion. They didn't know about Caleb. They'd never asked. They'd been so busy planning my future that they'd missed their own sister's son dying 3 floors above the gift shop. Caleb's been in this very hospital for 14 months, I told the room. Your nephew, Diane's been holding his hand while you held a brochure for my nursing home. And not one of you knew, because not one of you asks anybody anything unless there's money in the answer. The silence after that was the loudest thing I have ever heard. Greg stood up slowly. He looked at me, and for a second I thought maybe there was a real person in there. But all he said at the door was, "You're going to die alone, Ma. You know that. All this money and you'll have nobody." I walked him to the door myself, on my own 2 feet. Walker be damned. Maybe, I said, but alone is a step up from surrounded by people waiting for me to be useful again. I've been lonely before, Greg. I taught myself to like the quiet, at least the quiet that's honest. And I closed the door, gently. I didn't slam it. Slamming it would have given him the satisfaction of mattering that much. Then I turned around, and my daughter was standing in my living room, shaking. And I opened my arms, and she came apart in them. And then, because life is not a movie and the heart is a strange muscle, I picked up the phone and called Renee, the CNA who'd brushed my hair. And I said, "Honey, do you have dinner plans? Because I've got a whole roast and far too many leftovers, and I could use some good company." She came with her husband and her 2 little kids. We ate that dinner, after all, just with the right people at the table. Diane stayed. Caleb was stable enough that night that she could. The kids drew on my placemats. And I slept that night more deeply than I had since Raymond died. The aftermath came in pieces, the way it does. Greg tried one more time to lawyer his way through. He showed up at Marge's office with an attorney of his own, threatening to sue, demanding a competency evaluation. Marge told me about it on the phone, and I could hear the dry amusement in her voice. "And what did you tell them?" I asked. I asked if incompetent was really the word he wanted to use for the woman who turned $500 a month into $4.8 million while raising 4 children on a teacher's salary. Then I handed his attorney our evaluation. His attorney advised him to go home. A pause. He paid the first installment, by the way, with interest. It cleared this morning. I'll tell you the part I'm not proud of liking. It felt good, not gloating good, just settled, like a column that finally adds up. Aaron and Greg went a different route. They went around the neighborhood and to my church, telling anyone who'd listen that Mom had lost her mind, gotten rich somehow, and cut out her own kids, that some lawyer had her brainwashed. For about a week, I was the talk of the block. It backfired in the most beautiful way. My neighbor of 30 years, Pat Brennan, called me up. "Nell, I gotta ask. Aaron was just here saying you kicked your kids to the curb for no reason." "Pat," I said, "I spent 15 days in a hospital and not one of them came. I came home in an Uber. There was nothing in my fridge but a sad lemon. You know what abandonment looks like? It doesn't look like the woman who got left. It looks like the people doing the leaving now that there's money on the table." Pat was quiet a second, then, "That's what I figured." I told him to get off my porch. I had 15 days of hospital records with no visitors logged. The truth, it turns out, keeps its own grade book. But there's one more thing I have to tell you, and it's the thing that still makes my throat close up. Renee, a few weeks after that dinner, she came by the house to help me with a dressing change. She did it on her own time, wouldn't take a dime. And I finally asked her the thing I'd been wondering since the hospital. Why she'd looked at me like that. Why Mrs. Whitfield sounded so personal in her mouth. She got quiet, and then she said, "You don't remember me, do you?" I didn't. 25 years ago, Lincoln High, third period algebra. I was the kid in the back who never had her homework because my mom worked nights and there wasn't anybody home to make me do it. She smiled, but her eyes were wet. I was failing everything, and one day you kept me after class and you didn't yell. You drew that little rocket on the board, the compound interest one, and you said, "Rennie, I don't care about your grade right now. I care that you understand this one thing. Small choices made over and over when nobody's watching, that's the whole game. That's how a person climbs out." I had to sit down. "I went to community college off that," she said. "Then nursing school, nights while I worked days. Took me 9 years. And the whole time I had that stupid little rocket in my head. Small choices, nobody watching." She laughed and wiped her face. "I didn't know that lady in bed 12 was you, Mrs. Whitfield. I swear to God I didn't. I just saw an old woman whose kids never came, and I couldn't stand it. I'd have done it for anybody." She shook her head. "I didn't take care of you because you were rich. I didn't even know you were Nell Whitfield until I saw your file the day you left. I had spent 15 days alone, abandoned by the 4 children I'd given everything to. And the person who held my hand, who brushed my hair, who asked if I had family, was a student I'd kept after class 25 years ago, paying back a debt she didn't even know she owed, to a teacher she didn't even recognize. The lesson I'd planted in a failing kid in the back row had circled the whole earth and come back 3 weeks ago to sit at my bedside when my own blood wouldn't. That's when I knew what the money was for. I went back to the hospital, not as a patient this time, as a benefactor. I sat down with the board, and Dr. Lane nearly fell out of his chair when I walked in without a walker, Marge at my side. I told them I didn't want to donate equipment they had. I wanted to donate the one thing nobody had given me in that bed: dignity. We founded the Raymond and Eleanor Whitfield Fund, 2 programs. The first I called Second Chair, named for the empty chair beside my bed that I'd stared at for 15 days. The mission was simple. No elderly patient in that hospital would ever again lie alone, day after day, with no one in the second chair. We hired and trained companions to read to them, to hold their hands, to brush their hair, to call their families and ask one very direct question: "Do you understand that leaving an elderly person alone like this is a kind of harm?" I made Renee the director. She left bedside work to run it. She was born for it. She'd been training her whole life since the back of a third period algebra class. Second program is the one I love most. A financial literacy scholarship and a set of classes for high school kids, taught for free every September. The first lesson always is the rocket curve, compound interest, small, boring, patient, and then enormous. Because somewhere out there is a kid in the back row whose whole life turns on whether one tired teacher decides she's worth keeping after class. I donated the old house to the fund too, didn't sell it, donated it. It's a transition home now, for seniors leaving the hospital with nowhere to go. The crooked porch finally got fixed. Raymond would have laughed. Now, the part you actually want to know. What happened to them? Greg is paying me back, on schedule, every month. His firm let him go. Turns out I wasn't the only account he'd mismanaged. He doesn't talk much when he drops the check at Marge's. But he drops it. I'll take it. Aaron and I don't speak. He's the one who never came around, the one for whom it was always only the gold lot. I've made my peace with that. You can't save everyone. Some people only ever see the well, never the water. Tyler. I didn't ship him off to a work farm or cut him loose to starve. That's not justice. That's just cruelty wearing justice's coat. I sat him down and I told him about his grandfather, the apprentice who swept floors. And I paid for one thing, an electrician's apprenticeship, the same trade Raymond worked his whole life. Last week I got a letter from him, not a text, a letter, in his own bad handwriting. He's 3 months into the program. His hands are torn up. He failed his first practical and passed the second. And at the bottom he wrote, I made my own money for the first time in my life, Ma. It's not much, but it's mine. I think I'm finally starting to get the rocket thing. Thank you. It was the first real thank you I'd gotten from any of my children in 20 years. And Diane and Caleb. I quietly paid for everything, every treatment, every fight with the insurance through Marge, so it was clean. But I made it conditional on one thing, that Diane stop lying, to me, to herself, to anybody, that she let her family carry the weight with her instead of breaking her own back to look strong. Caleb is in remission now, 17 years old, hair growing back, a smart mouth like his grandfather. He calls me every Sunday. Diane comes to dinner, real dinner at the new place with the right people. We don't pretend the hospital didn't happen. We talk about it. That's the whole repair, really. We finally talk about things. I'm 71 years old, almost 72. My new hip is stronger than a 30-year-old's. I take an aqua fitness class on Tuesdays. I chair a foundation. My calendar is full. Last month, they had a ribbon cutting for the second chair wing, and Renee handed me the giant scissors, and I cut that ribbon, and I want to tell you, I didn't feel like an old woman. I didn't even feel like a mother. I felt like a teacher who'd finally seen one of her lessons land all the way. A young nurse came up to me afterward, eyes shining, and said, You're Mrs. Whitfield, right? The teacher? My grandma's in this wing. Somebody sits with her every single day now. I don't know how to thank you. I just smiled. They left me alone in a silent room and thought that was the end of me. They thought the quiet was where I'd disappear. They never understood the quiet at all. The quiet is where compound interest does its work. The quiet is where I'd been winning patiently for 39 years. In that silent hospital room with the empty chair beside me, I wasn't dying. I was just getting started. And what about you? Have you ever had to learn how to put a fence around your love? Not because you stopped loving, but because you finally started loving yourself too? Tell me. Maybe your story is exactly what somebody else scrolling tonight needs to hear.
Let me step out of Nell's story for a second, because this one really got me. We like to believe family is automatic, that the people we pour ourselves into will pour something back. But love without honesty isn't really love. It's more like a subscription somebody forgot to cancel. And what moves me about Nell isn't the 4.8 million. It's that the thing that saved her wasn't a secret fortune at all. And it was a habit, patience, showing up for herself quietly for 39 years, long before anyone ever clapped. That's a fortune any one of us can start building tonight, no matter how little we've got. Maybe that's the real lesson she spent her whole life teaching. You can't control whether people decide you're worth it, but you can absolutely refuse to disappear. So here's my honest question, and I read every single reply but has loving someone ever cost you yourself? Tell me down below. And if Nell's story moved you, stay with me. There are a lot more of these to come.